June 6, 1943. The Atlantic wind whipped across the deck of the Liberty ship Joseph Warren as it glided into the gray waters of Chesapeake Bay. Below deck, hundreds of weary German prisoners craned their necks toward the light seeping through the hatches. For many, this was the first time they had seen land since capture in North Africa. The journey had been long, silent, and uncertain. Whispers moved through the crowd, rumors of what awaited them. Some believed they would be forced into mines or factories. Others, that they'd never see Germany again. But what greeted them at Norfolk, Virginia, was not a firing squad or a barbed wire cage. It was a sprawling naval base, alive with motion, color, and sound. Dock cranes groaned under the weight of cargo. Sailors shouted orders, and to the astonishment of every prisoner, black and white workers labored side by side, something no man from Hitler's Reich had ever seen. Corporal Hans Kruger, a 26-year-old tank gunner from Bremen, later wrote, "I was prepared to see America's strength in steel, but what I saw first was its strength in people." The air smelled of diesel and coffee. Bands played somewhere beyond the warehouses. Women in uniformed coveralls moved between trucks, their hair tied back with scarves, driving forklifts like veterans. The prisoners exchanged uneasy glances. This was not the America they had been warned about. The decadent nation of chaos and mongrels. This was something else entirely. An American lieutenant barked orders in fluent German. Single file. No talking. "Welcome to Norfolk Naval Base." The tone was strict, but not cruel. Behind him, USMPs carried rifles, but their posture was relaxed, almost casual. It confused the prisoners. No screaming, no beatings, no dogs. Just efficiency. As the men stepped onto the wooden pier, the morning haze began to lift. Across the bay, they could see civilian cars driving freely. Children selling newspapers. Sailors joking with workers. The prisoners stared in silence. How could this country fight a global war and still look so normal? Lieutenant Kruger whispered to the man beside him, "Greater than if this is captivity, it looks strangely free." That first step on American soil would mark the beginning of an experience that shattered every belief they had been taught. Over the next 2 years, these men, the same soldiers who had sworn loyalty to Hitler, would come face to face with a version of America that defied everything Nazi propaganda had told them. And in that confrontation, something remarkable would happen. They would begin to change. Part 2. Processing and first shock. The line of prisoners wound through the base like a slow-moving river of gray uniforms. Each man clutched a small cloth bag, all that remained of his former life. Inside were letters, a photo, maybe a belt buckle, marked with the eagle and swastika. Now those symbols looked strangely powerless. At the head of the line stood a sign written in 2 languages. Reception area. Geneva Convention rules apply. The Germans blinked at the words. Geneva Convention. Most had heard the term. Few had believed it was real. A young American officer read the regulations aloud in fluent German. Each sentence seemed more impossible than the last. "You will receive medical care. You will be paid for work. You will not be harmed." Some men laughed bitterly. They assumed it was propaganda. Then came the medical inspection. Rows of white-coated medics. Men and women waited with clipboards. A corporal from Hamburg stepped forward and froze. The medic, drawing his blood, was black. In Germany, that act was forbidden by law. Yet here, it was routine. The prisoner's eyes darted away, ashamed, not by the medic, but by his own confusion. Dr. Charles Henderson, U.S. Army Medical Corps, noted in his report, "The Germans arrive wary but obedient. Once treated humanely, they begin to relax. It unsettles them more than harshness ever could." Each prisoner was issued clean clothes, a numbered tag, and a small booklet explaining their rights. They were photographed, fingerprinted, and fed. Thick stew, bread, coffee. The food alone silenced the room. Some hadn't eaten a full meal in weeks. Private Otto Lehman, captured at Tunis, later wrote, "Greater than when the spoon touched my mouth, I realized they expected me to live. In Africa, we expected to die in captivity. Here, they wanted us alive." Nearby, an American sergeant joked with a group of sailors as the prisoners ate. No one shouted. no one struck them. The sergeant even pointed out where they could smoke afterward. For men raised under SS discipline, that casual mercy was terrifying. Outside, a brass band rehearsed for a war bond rally. Music drifted across the docks. Jazz, bright and alive. One of the older Germans covered his ears, muttering, but the rhythm followed them into the transport trucks. Impossible to ignore. The convoy left Norfolk that evening, under a golden sky. Windows of nearby houses glowed with dinner light. Families waved from porches as the trucks rolled by, waving at their enemies. The prisoners stared back in disbelief. On the train heading inland, the differences grew sharper. The cars weren't freight boxes. They were cushioned coaches. They passed through Washington, D.C., where civilians crowded the platforms to watch. Children pointed laughing, not afraid. In one station cafe, American women served coffee within sight of armed guards. No one panicked. War and life seemed to exist side by side. Lehman later wrote, "Greater than it was like watching another planet, one where fear had not yet won." Hours later, the train pulled into a siding outside a Texas camp. The sun was already rising. Barbed wire glittered like silver threads across endless fields. Wooden barracks stood in neat rows, each with electric lights glowing inside. Over the gate hung a sign, "Camp Hearn, U.S. Army Installation." The prisoners climbed down, expecting cruelty at last. Instead, a calm voice greeted them in German. "Welcome to Camp Hearn. You will be treated according to the laws of war. If you behave, you will live well." It was Lieutenant Colonel Cecil Stiles, the camp commander, tall, confident, fluent in their language. He ordered them to stand at ease, and then, unbelievably, wished them good morning. That night, after hot showers and real mattresses, silence filled the barracks. No guards shouting, no boots echoing on concrete, just the hum of ceiling fans and the distant bark of Texas dogs. For the first time in years, many slept without fear. Part 3. Life inside Camp Hearn. Morning came with a whistle, not a shout. The prisoners lined up outside, blinking in the Texas sun. The air smelled of dust, hay, and bacon from the American mess hall. The guards moved calmly, rifles slung but rarely raised. No one barked orders. It was discipline through routine, not fear. Inside the camp, rows of neat wooden huts housed more than 4,000 German people. Each hut had bunks, lights, and even a stove. They were stunned. Some whispered, "They must be preparing us for something." Others simply stared, trying to understand how an enemy could live like this. After breakfast, oatmeal, eggs, and coffee, the prisoners were told they could work, not forced but asked. Those who volunteered were paid 80 cents a day in camp currency. They built roads, chopped wood, harvested crops for nearby American farms. And, with every paycheck came another shock. They could use it to buy soap, razors, even candy. In time, the Germans opened small bakeries, tailor shops, and even a theater inside the camp. Captured soldiers, who once fought under Rommel, now acted in comedies and played violins for guards and prisoners alike. The camp library grew to thousands of books, English and German both. Each page turned their fear into curiosity. One young Luftwaffe pilot, Karl Brenner, wrote in his diary, "Greater than they want us to think, to read, to argue. They treat us not as beasts, but as men. That is the true weapon of democracy." Sunday mornings, the local Texan pastor held church services. He preached in English, and a German translator followed line by line. Some prisoners prayed, others just listened. Outside the chapel, guards stood smoking, not watching for escape, but waiting for the sermon to end. There were arguments too. Some prisoners still believed Hitler would win. They formed small Nazi groups, tried to enforce discipline in sight. But as the war dragged on, more and more men broke away from them. The evidence was everywhere. Freedom, food, and fairness, things they'd been told only existed in propaganda. One afternoon, American guards invited the Germans to play baseball. At first, the idea was absurd. The enemy playing games with us. But soon, laughter filled the field. Bat cracked, gloves snapped, and for a moment, war disappeared. A photograph from that day shows something extraordinary. German prisoner sliding into second base, while an American laughs beside him. Enemies a year ago, teammates now. At night, the prisoners sat outside their huts, watching the sky burn orange and purple. They spoke quietly about home. The city's bombed, the family's gone. Some began writing letters to America, asking to stay after the war. They had seen a world they never imagined existed. By 1945, Camp Hearn had changed them. They arrived as soldiers of the Reich, proud, disciplined, convinced of victory. They left as men who no longer believed in what they'd fought for. When the news of Germany's surrender reached the camp, no one cheered. There was only silence. A few men cried. One whispered, "We are lucky we were captured by them, not by hate." As the months passed, ships carried the prisoners back across the Atlantic. They were thinner, older, but their eyes held something new: clarity. They had been defeated by weapons, yes, but transformed by decency. In the ports of New York, some Americans waved goodbye to the departing trains. Guards shook hands with prisoners. A few exchanged addresses, promising to write, and they did. Years later, many former POWs returned to America, not in chains, but by choice. Some became farmers in Texas. Others married American women, and a few joined peace organizations. Speaking to young soldiers about what they had learned, Carl Brenner, the pilot, wrote before leaving, "They showed us the America we were told did not exist. We came as enemies. We leave as witnesses." Back in Germany, when they spoke of their time in captivity, few believed them. People asked, "You mean they fed you, let you work, treated you fairly?" The former POS only nodded and said, "Yes, and that is why they won." For decades afterward, historians studied those camps and found that the transformation of those prisoners became one of the quiet victories of World War II. A war not won only by guns, but by the strength of human dignity. The barbed wire of Camp Hearn is long gone now. Only the wind moves where the barracks once stood. But the lesson remains, carved in silence. Sometimes, the greatest shock of war is kindness.